Howdy fellas, what's crackin'? It's Entei, and today I'm hitting you with some deliciously arbitrary and heavily biased power rankings that are the life force of draft-based leagues. It's gonna be juicy. But before we begin, in case you didn't get the hint just now, this list is going to be riddled with my opinion on the current state of your draft after a precursory examination. I feel I took an appropriate amount of time analyzing each team, but realized there are 16 coaches and just one catchable Entei. The quality of this video is not the greatest. I had to just power through it, so I apologize, but all the information is there. If I rank you low, I don't like your draft, and if I rank you high, I do. There's gotta be winners and losers, and with that in mind, I'll leave you with a quick quote from the fictional character Robert California, which I believe fleshes out my feelings quite well. Winners prove me right, losers prove me wrong. And without further ado, let's begin. The Undead Legion, coached by Ionite Fenrir, rank 16th. Not unlike his username, Ionite Fenrir's draft struggles to find an identity. There are some scary powerful Pokemon like Gyarados and Cloyster that can run through weakened teams even if their sweep-oriented sets are typically predictable. Throw in a multifaceted booster like Lucario, and you've got yourself some scary cleaning potential. Versatility is spooky, and Lucario brings it. But cleaners rely on wall breakers, and I'm not overly confident that Charizard, Rotom Fan, and Machamp make cohesive enough of a wall-breaking core to really back up the cleaners. Cleaners enjoy hazards too, but the Undead Legion's hazard game is awkward at best. The team would have to rely on Cloyster for spikes or toxic spikes, and it doesn't look like Stealth Rocks are anywhere to be found. Cloyster is also the only rapid spinner, but there is defog on both Rotoms and technically on Charizard. There are a lot of tank stats on this draft. In fact, it ranks 3rd overall in terms of both special defense and offense. Milotic is one of the most annoying and tankiest monstrosities out there, but there isn't much in the way of synergy between the defensive Pokemon on this team, and it shows in the lack of resistances. 1 Electric Resist, 1 Psychic Resist, 1 Ghost Resist, 1 Dragon Resist, and 1 Fairy Resist does not bode well for this team's future. The Roseraiders Dragapult, Wild Charges Galvantula, and Classic City Crushes Hatterene lay waste to this team, and that's only from in-division matches. The Undead Legion boasts 3 water, 3 fighting, and 3 flying types, but no grass, no ground, no dragon. What do a second Rotom and Throw even bring to the table? A desperate defog user and a worse Machamp. Having the highest number of missing types is not a good look. Better work on bringing that 9 down to a more manageable number. I'd like to see Throw and one of the Rotoms off the team, ideally for a grass and ground type to relieve the pressure that Milotic is no doubt about to be feeling this season. We'll just have to see if the boosters can carry the draft with the pillars of Milotic and Umbreon to support them. The Full Metal Alremie, coached by Jen Goff, rank 15th. Holy ground weakness, Batman. When 6 of your Pokemon get smacked by Earthquake and a whopping 0 can resist it, you're going to have yourself a shaky season. Get it? Shaky? Anyways, I know Ferrothorn is good, but is it that good? No offensive moves on Pyukumuku means it also won't be able to provide immediate support, although a slow death by Toxic, Counter, and or Mirror Coat is certainly a threat. There's going to have to be a lot of that though, since the Alremie also don't have a Ghost or Dark Resist, and only 1 Dragon Resist. With 8 missing types from this draft, holes like that are bound to emerge. In other news, the combination of Dragon Steel makes for great neutral coverage, especially when combined with something like Chandelure to threaten those pesky steel types that Duraludon may struggle with. This draft has the highest overall defense stat of any in the league, so it's definitely prepared to take on physical attackers. It is also the slowest in the league, however, and the emergency Jolteon for speed control is going to have its work cut out for it. Jen and Goff can set hazards up, but take them off? Not so much. Not a good sign for a draft that will likely need to outlast opponents over extended games. It may indeed be hard to break through this draft, since Ferrothorn, Torkoal, and Pyukumuku do make for the classic Fire, Water, Grass defensive core that balances their weaknesses well if nothing else. The real downfall of this draft comes from a lack of versatility, which is the name of the game in draft-based play. Duraludon, Jolteon, and Glaceon get limited coverage, but not nearly enough. Chandelure has the best versatility, and everything else looks pretty one-dimensional. I don't think this draft is going to be capable of keeping up with even moderately offensive drafts, so we're probably going to see some stall from Jen Goff until enough walls are broken down for one of his few offensive threats to exert some pressure. Ferrothorn and Pyukumuku are certainly known for stall, but they are going to have a lot of threats thrown at them. I'm curious to see if they'll be able to withstand the heat and carry this draft. The Carolina Cinderaces, coached by Stinger, rank 14th. I had to come back to this one because Stinger decided to use all 3 free agents before the season even started. Despite making use of said free agents, the defensive holes in this draft are egregious. 1 resistance each for ground, psychic, rock, ghost, and dark type moves, and even then it's from Pokemon like Sirfetch'd and Persian, not exactly defensive marvels. As if that wasn't enough, nothing on this draft resists flying or dragon type moves, which are some of the most detrimental and spammable moves in the game. And the draft is missing 9 Pokemon types, the most in the league. Regardless, the draft looks pretty good defensively. Sableye and Toxapex have surprisingly good synergy together, especially when backed by Goodrow's impressive move pool and Serena with hazard control. Stinger has the highest average special defense stat in the league and comes in 3rd for defense, but it's worth noting that these numbers are inflated because of Wishiwashi, who obviously becomes pretty useless below 1/4 HP. Strong offensive stats and good speed control are good news for the Cinderaces, but odd offensive pairings like Cinderace and Salazzle may expose this draft's inability to adapt. Relying on your dragons to break through opposing dragons is not always advisable, but without a fairy, ice, or steel type, Goodrow looks to be the only one capable of fighting off dragons. Serena has rapid spin and Sirfetch'd might make for a good defogger, but setting up hazards is a little more of a challenge. From what I can tell, this draft only has access to toxic spikes, which is something less than ideal. Toxapex and Sableye are sure to put up a fight, but if they go down, the rest of the draft is free to be picked apart by any number of things. It just seems like Stinger panicked over the draft's weaknesses and switched a bunch of stuff around out of desperation to address the gaping holes. Except the holes are still very apparent, and now there's no electric or ice type, and a Dusclops that I guess gets interesting coverage, but will inevitably be outshone by Sableye except in very specific situations. I'm not at all convinced this draft is drastically better than where it started, which should be expected from free agenting 3 Pokemon immediately. We'll see if the mascot can carry. The Resort City Marshadows, coached by Free, rank 13th. The other clear weather draft, although this one depends on hail. Hail is definitely accepted to be pretty bad, in fact probably the worst form of weather, but maybe this draft will prove the haters wrong. Weather drafts tend to be forced to rely on a lot of Pokemon with the same type, and with that comes abusable defensive holes. The Marshadows certainly confirm this stereotype, with 6 fire weaknesses and 1 resist, and 4 rock weaknesses and no resists. There is also no ghost resist, plus 1 resist each for psychic and dark types. There are a lot of missing types, and 8 might be a bit much, but sacrifices must be made in the name of hail, so let's talk about it. Slush Rush is the new equivalent to Swift Swim, albeit ice moves don't get buffed like water moves do, and Arctozolt looks like it could be particularly potent with it. Electric Ice is amazingly good neutral coverage, and ironically one of the only things that can switch into Arctozolt is Arctozolt, plus a couple of the Rotoms and Togedemaru, but seriously that's it. Other than that, Arctozolt can hit every single Pokemon in the league neutrally with its stab, which is nothing to sneeze at. Its move pool, like Arctovish, is unfortunately pretty lackluster and does not leave much room for versatility. Much of this draft suffers from that same problem. Corviknight has some odd utility, and Abomasnow gets a couple random coverage moves, but the best and really only versatility comes from Weezing Galar of all things. Poltegeist is scary with Shell Smash, but sadly must keep these buffs to itself due to the Baton Pass clause. Controlling hazards is going to be a challenge, with limited options both for setting them up and removing them. And with this many ice types, Stealth Rocks sticking around are going to be highly problematic. As someone who has always loved ice types, I respect Free for even attempting this type of draft. Mad props, buddy, but you clearly saw your typing holes and slapped on Weezing Galar to combat fighting types, Lantern for fire types, and Rotom for rock types without much care for cohesiveness, and called it a day. Still, you got the ice synergy you wanted. Ice Face, SQ, and Snowcloak Mamoswine, and complete the list of Pokemon that benefit from Abomasnow's Snow Warning. Maybe Ice Face and Arctozolt can carry this crippled frozen draft. I wanted to succeed with all my heart, but sadly Realism hits like a truck. At least only one of your divisional opponents drafted a fire type. The Classic City Crush, coached by Monk, rank 12th. The Classic City Crush come flying out of the gate at a breakneck pace, topping the league charts in not just average speed but also average special attack. Plus they're second in HP, so there's just a whole lot of fast beef running around. The average speed for this league is 72, far below Monk's average of 87. This draft is a whole 7 points ahead of the second place team. That's a lot of speed, and they can use it well with wall breakers like Noivern, Gallade, and potentially Arcanine, who I think complement each other well. Speaking of complementary, it's damn near impossible to cover Tyranitar's 7 weaknesses, but Hatterene and Arcanine together do a pretty commendable job. Hatterene takes care of fighting types while Tyranitar scares ghosts, and Arcanine can cover Steel and Bug for both of them. Versatile coverage on the likes of Obstagoon and Mr. Mime Galar will prove to be very useful while prepping each week. A little versatility goes a long way in draft play if you're willing to put in the effort. Hazards can go onto the field by Tyranitar's or Excelger's hands, but getting them off may be slightly trickier. Hatterene has Magic Bounce, which could come in clutch, but defog on Skuntank is the only true removal, and bringing defog while trying to stack spikes with the likes of Excelgor feels pretty bad. Then again, with 5 rock weaknesses and Tyranitar as the only resist, Monk's hand may be forced when it comes to determining Skuntank's set. Still, Skuntank and Lapras round out the draft's overall resistances fairly well, but not well enough. There's 1 normal, flying, dragon, steel, and fairy resist, and 0 electric resist. Nada. So if a team can Volt Switch on Monk, they will. This is going to be especially painful for a draft like this one, which is going to rely heavily on maintaining pressure and forcing opponents to play reactively instead of proactively. There's no grass, electric, ground, ghost, or steel type present in the draft, thanks mostly to the 3 dark and 3 psychic types. In fact, Tyranitar's Sandstream hits every single one of its teammates. All of Monk's in-division opponents have access to Volt Switch, and we may see that pressure manifest in a free agent or trade for a ground type or an ability-based electric immunity. The Classic City Crush are going to need to set the tempo of each match, but it will be hard to do that if they can't stop opponents' switch initiative. The Roseraiders, coached by Ethereal Rose, rank 11th. The Roseraiders are one of the few coaches that drafted their mascot. Bonus points? Not really, but what does give bonus points is the defensive balance of this team. Colossal and Mantine make for a lovely defensive duo, especially with support from things like Vikavolt and Dusknoir. Hazard control, status, recovery, resistance synergy, it's all there and it brings a tear to my eye. And with a blisteringly fast and versatile cleaner like Dragapult in the wings, with access to the ever-detrimental Ghost Stab, coaches may be challenged by how to approach this draft. It was interesting to see Ethereal Rose immediately free agent Reuniclus in favor of Dugtrio, as revenge-killing rock, steel, fire, and/or electric types don't seem overly important for this team. I'll be curious to see if that choice ends up being regretted, as Reuniclus has historically performed quite well in draft format to my knowledge. Despite the fast upper-tier Pokemon, the Roseraiders rank 6th in terms of overall speed, slightly above halfway. Then again, Sticky Webs on Vikavolt is something that could bring the faster teams down a notch. Unfortunately, the draft does suffer from quite the same thing as it may hope to prey on this season, having just 1 dragon and 1 ghost resist. Sadly, it doesn't stop there, as there is also 1 flying and dark resist on the draft. I foresee Pangoro needing to pick up a lot of the coverage slack, though he may be forced to bite off more than he can chew. Durant might be able to relieve some of that pressure, but it better hope that the attacks aimed at it aren't special. At least it can't get surprised by Hidden Power Fire anymore. Overall, there are 4 missing types on this draft, which is about average: Normal, Ice, Psychic, and Fairy. Definitely manageable, but it will be interesting to see if, because of no Psychic or Fairy type, and Mantine as the only flying type, killing fighting types becomes a problem during the season. Reuniclus, where art thou? The draft totals 5 fighting resists, 2 of which are on immunity, but fighting types do definitely tend to have that annoying quality of convenient coverage moves: elemental punches, rock moves, dark moves, etc. I expect this draft will be forced to rely heavily on its strong defensive core in order to outlast and clean up opponents. Get ready to see Dragapult every week. The Town Nickit, coached by Skullbunny, rank 10th. The immediately noticeable trait the members of this draft share with one another is a lack of speed. Weavile aside, the fastest Pokemon is Orbeetle at 90, followed by Quillfish at 85. It's great that Skullbunny managed to score a Sticky Web user with the former, but when it comes time to prep, the Nickit may be forced to consistently bring Orbeetle instead of having free reign on creativity. Then there's the challenge of keeping webs on the field, which is helped by having threatening boosters, wall breakers, spin blockers, or the Defiant ability. Well, this draft has access to all but one of those, with Pokemon like Diggersby, Toxtricity, and Delmise. And of course Weavile always needs to be taken into account. This A-tier pick will likely be intensely valuable throughout the season, largely because of its speed, but also because it is a classic example of a Pokemon with 4-move slot syndrome, who are usually very good in draft-based play. This just means that while it might get limited coverage compared to others, being able to pick the coverage it needs to tear apart enemy drafts is hugely threatening. Speaking of coverage, Drampa gets a whole lot of it, but nothing else on the draft looks overly diverse when it comes to move pools. I guess Aromatisse gets Thunderbolt and Energy Ball, and Togetic has some weird options, but that's about the size of it. Another possible shortcoming is the typing synergy. No rock or steel type means that Delmise is the only normal resist, which shouldn't be too bad, but also means that Toxtricity is the only flying resist, which could be very bad against certain teams. The defensive core of Delmise, Quillfish, and Togetic is an interesting one. If you're a fighting type, forget about it. This is good since Skullbunny's main offensive threats, Weavile and Diggersby, are obviously pretty scared of fighting types. And aside from the aforementioned flying weakness, the trio does a decent job handling everything else. No recovery on Quillfish, but at least Delmise has Synthesis, and of course Togetic has Roost, and, like Aromatisse, access to Wish. They provide plenty of status options and other annoying moves, and can keep hazards away with additional support from Hitmontop. Setting hazards up, though, Stealth Rocks are not available to the Nickit, but they do have access to Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and Sticky Web. Undeniably a powerful draft, but one that I fear may become predictable and therefore exploitable. The London Finneon, coached by Jaskar, rank 9th. It's hard for me to get a read on Jaskar's draft. It's very slow, ranking 15th in the league for overall speed, with Liepard being the fastest at 106, followed by Rotom Wash. And if Rotom Wash is the runner-up in a speed race, your draft is pretty slow. But if Liepard can pull off this prankster rain dance shenanigans that it seems to be threatening, suddenly there are 3 possible Swift Swim users and the average speed gets an adrenaline shot. The team is very well balanced defensively, the only minor shortcoming being Claydol as the sole electric resist, and, perhaps more concerning, Liepard as the only ghost resist. But the Finneon are missing 6 typings on their roster, including typically highly sought types like Fire, Fighting, and Dragon, that may leave holes in offensive coverage. Sylveon is a strong wall breaker, even if not overly versatile, and also has oddly good synergy with other members. For instance, Sylveon can struggle with Steel and Poison types, but Jaskar picked up Claydol. The Hazard game looks sound and adaptable, which is never something to be overlooked. Ditto 2 is an incredible pick that pressures other coaches before the game even starts because of the sizable threat it poses to boosters. Copperajah gets a bunch of random coverage, and Claydol, like most Psychic types, can be equally unpredictable. It looks to be a pliable draft, capable of taking hits when it needs to, but dishing them out as well. I just don't know if this draft has the defensive prowess or recovery options to continue taking hits over the course of an extended match, so I think the Finneon will need to identify and execute their win condition quickly. A lot of Jaskar's success or failure this season will depend on preparation. There may be limited ways to approach breaking through opponents each week, but the Finneon definitely have the capability to bring the pain if the prep is strong. The Raleigh Rotoms, coached by Pokeboy, rank 8th. Pokeboy has got some serious threats on what looks like a hyper-offense draft, especially with Shuckle for dedicated hazards and general skullduggery, accompanied by blistering speed control from Inteleon and Ninjask. The average overall stats of this draft get pretty distorted because of Aegislash, Dubwool, and Shuckle, but I'll mention some of them anyways. The Rotoms rank 2nd for average overall speed, and that's still taking Shuckle into account. This draft is fast and has access to speed boost just to add insult to injury. Similar to the San Diego Wild Chargers, this draft ranks high in attack, 3rd, but comes in dead last for special attack, 16th. That's not to say that Pokeboy is forced to bring physical attackers. Indeed, part of Aegislash's value comes from mixed stats, and Dracozolt too can run special spreads, but they may be forced into special attacking roles against certain teams, detracting from their versatility. The threat of Baton Pass on Phalanx and Ninjask make this already offensive team even more threatening, especially with beasts like Dracozolt, Drapion, and Galiospod that can easily weaken opposing Pokemon. I'm not sure what Dubwool is doing here honestly, but Fluffy is pretty cool. More Baton Pass, I suppose. But if the opponents expect Baton Pass, and they will, all it takes is one Haze or similar move, and all the setup is out the window. Not a lot of great ways to clear hazards, defog on Ninjask I guess, but a hyper-offense team shouldn't care too much about that anyways. The Rotoms lineup is going to come in and try to kill stuff, not switch around and play mind games. Defensive synergy probably won't matter too much for the same reason, but I'll point out that the draft has only 1 Electric, Dragon, and Fairy resist. It's also missing out on 6 typings, including Fire, Ground, and Fairy, which tend to carry powerful offensive moves. Grass, Dragon, and especially Electric types could be hard to deal with, but luckily there are not a whole lot of bulky electric Pokemon running around. Rest in peace, Zapdos. This draft looks too powerful and has too many boosters to realistically struggle with physical walls, but Pokeboy may be forced to bring special spreads despite preferring physical ones because of the lack of specially offensive prominence this team possesses. The Pennsylvania Pawniards, coached by Slacker, rank 7th. This draft is one of the few that can boast near perfect resistance synergy. Having at least 2 resistances in every type except Fairy, which just has 1, Kling Klang, will likely limit the number of approaches that coaches can take when trying to break open this draft. Grimmsnarl, Flygon, and Oranguru all bring commendable versatility options to the table that should keep opponents on their toes. Dragon Spam can be hard to handle, and the offensive core of Dracovish and Appleton, with support from Flygon for steel types, could prove potent against a wide range of other drafts. However, with so many dragons, I wonder if the lack of fairy switch-ins will neuter this draft. Ice types could be hard to handle as well, though there are certainly more options there than against fairies. A strong fire type has the potential to deal with both, but sadly we see no fire Pokemon drafted by Slacker. An electric, fighting, poison, flying, bug, and rock type are also all missing. There are too many coverage similarities there to go over, but like I said, I am mostly worried about opposing ice types and fairies. Speed control isn't great either. The Pawniards rank 13th overall, and there isn't a lot of speed amongst the upper tier threats. They can certainly hit hard and will likely have to rely on abusing coverage moves on their bulky offensive Pokemon, who can hopefully smack a switch in, tank a hit, and blow them back with surprise coverage. Screens and hazards will prove useful for this strategy, and there are definitely a few options for setting them up. Having Flygon as the only defogger though could be problematic. Status will be useful too, and having access to Prankster and an annoying Pokemon like Trevenant should prove to be wildly helpful. As opposed to having some dedicated tanks and some dedicated attackers, there is definitely a more general balance of bulky offense. With that being said, Quagsire is a good addition should the Pawniards struggle to find an answer to particularly strong attackers, albeit only ones that don't carry grass coverage. At least there's no more hidden power, so Quagsire can breathe a little easier. Definitely an interesting draft that has its shortcomings like any other, but thanks to their strong identity, the Pawniards should know their approach going into each week. The East Coast Excadrill, coached by Nala, rank 6th. One of only 2 clear weather drafts this season, and Nala has chosen rain. The synergy is certainly there, obviously with Drizzle Pelipper and Swift Swim Barraskewda making for a potent couple. You've got clear threats like Thunder Raichu and Dryskin Toxicroak to additionally make use of the rain, but also plenty of Pokemon that greatly appreciate reduced fire damage, Escavalier being the main example. And of course Silvally can become a water type if need be, for improved stab and still make use of its impressive move pool. Silvally also represents the only possible ghost resist. When prepping for formidable ghosts, Silvally's type may be beyond Nala's control. That's the only chink in the armor though, which is impressive considering you would expect a rain draft to be weak to grass and electric. Speaking of typings, the Excadrills are missing a fire, psychic, rock, dragon, and ghost type from their ranks. The missing fire type is certainly to be expected, and opposing grass type shouldn't be too hard for Pelipper and Toxicroak to break down. But missing a dragon means missing out on generally impressive defensive and offensive capabilities, and no dark means a lack of ghost answers. There are good hazard setting options such as standard Piloswine, but also niche ones like Mawile. Silvally gets access to defog, and Pelipper might also be able to step up in a pinch. And of course, Prankster status on Whimsicott is always going to be hard to deal with, and can easily cripple opposing threats to make room for cleaners. The average stats for this draft are relatively middling, though it does rank 5th in speed. Barraskewda, Raichu, and Silvally should not have too much trouble outpacing opponents and hitting them hard, regardless of rain. Any weather draft risks being predictable, which can be an advantage for opponents. Nala can always choose to throw opponents for a loop and not bring rain, but can a team be created from this draft that functions at a high level without rain? This is a tough question for some rain drafts to answer, and in the Excadrill's case I think the answer is yes. Toxicroak, Barraskewda, and Raichu all enjoy rain but clearly don't require it, just to name a few, and over-prepping for rain only for it not to come could be the downfall of Nala's opponents this season. The San Diego Wild Chargers, coached by Raleigh, rank 5th. Raleigh is known for his hyper-offense style, but I wonder if he feels this season satisfies his standards. The draft comes 4th in overall speed, which is great, 2nd for overall attack, which is greater, and 15th for overall special attack, which is... wait a minute. Obviously, it's not strictly accurate to average the stats of all 10 Pokemon. Some will likely never use their special attack, others will never use their attack. But every coach is subjected to the same metric, so it should kinda even out. And the San Diego Wild Chargers hyper-offense draft beats out only one other team when it comes to special attack. They are also dead last in defense and 14th in special defense, but that's to be expected. There's looking to be some bird spam in store for whoever squares up versus this team, which may prove to be devastating, even more so because of the threat of Electric Surge on Hawlucha. You may know what's coming, but does it even matter? Raleigh is going to have to hope the answer is no, since there is no way he is outlasting opponents. Hazard control looks great, especially since sticky webs are horrifying on a team like this, and Rapid Spin is no longer a wasted move on offensive Excadrill. There's not much priority on this draft, so I think speed control is going to be important. Even though resistances likely won't mean much for the Wild Chargers this season, it is a miraculously well-balanced draft with the only hole being a single water resist. I am admittedly worried about the lack of special attacking threats. It looks as though the special attackers were mostly just tacked onto the end of the draft as an afterthought, with the exception of Galvantula. If opposing physical walls are too strong, this pain train shudders to a halt. Poor Masharna may have a lot of responsibilities before it's even had a chance to grow up. You know I have to touch on missing types, and there are 4. Grass, Poison, Rock, and Dragon. I'm interested to see how the lack of a Dragon, which is a typing known for offensive prowess, affects the Wild Chargers. The draft looks like it can be predicted, but it seems that Raleigh will be daring his opponents to try it. One misstep and it's a one-way trip to 6-0ville. The Cape Town Krookodiles, coached by It's Bruno, rank 4th. This draft actually holds the medal for the most diverse number of immunities, specifically granted by abilities, which is a unique title to hold. It has a fire, water, electric, grass, and ground immunity, thanks to stuff like Flash Fire and Sap Sipper. Whether this was intentional or not, it certainly helps to have a lot of possible immunities, and this is reflected in the draft's excellent overall defensive synergy. The only hole, which is shaping up to be a hole for a lot of drafts this season, comes from Mandibuzz being the only ghost resist. Mandibuzz is undeniably bulky and has access to good recovery, so hopefully this chink in the armor isn't too exploitable. Its Bruno managed to secure Gengar as well, so at least other coaches won't be able to use it. Speaking of Gengar, there are a lot of special attackers on this draft. In fact, it ranks 2nd overall in terms of average special attack. It interestingly ranks 15th for average attack, which is quite the opposite of a few other teams this season, which had a lot of attackers but minimal special attackers. Even though it's not strictly a typing trio, I like how the combination of Clefable, Gengar, and Ninetales function on paper. In practice may be a different story, but they should square up nicely against opposing tanks due to their power and generally good move pools. Mandibuzz and Gastrodon also look to be a tough defensive pairing to break through, especially with the support of a steel type like Bronzong. The lower tier picks do bring odd weather possibilities to the table, but it looks like they were mostly picked up to cover missing typings from earlier in the draft. And it worked pretty well since there are only 4 missing types. No rock type may be stressful for team building, because right now Bronzong is the only Pokemon with access to Stealth Rocks. There is some boosting potential, some good status options, limited priority, limited pivoting, a dash of pretty much everything. There's great bulk but also nice speed control. Really the only thing that could hold this team back is having Conkeldurr as the only reliable physical attacker. Special Walls and Assault Vests look poised to be the bane of this draft's existence this season, but who knows, maybe I'm sleeping on physical Vanillux. The Halifax Hydreigons, coached by Daz. Or Daze? Daz? I'm gonna say Daz. Coached by Daz, rank 3rd. Daz has managed to whip up the best draft in the league when it comes to weakness synergy. Every single type is matched by 2 or more resistances, a commendable feat that no other coach accomplished. The Hydreigons boast a classic Firewater Grass defensive core with Rotom Heat, Araquanid, and Eldegoss, with good supporting options sprinkled throughout the draft. It actually ranks 2nd in terms of average special defense, but every other stat is in the bottom 40%. Though these stat averages may not look like a promising statistic, they do tend to be more intriguing than they are indicative of a draft's potential. Tend to be. More compelling is the incredible precision with which this draft was constructed. Exactly 1 of every type save 3, Ice, Flying, and Rock. Strong opposing flying types could be tough for the Hydreigons to handle, because they have no Rock or Ice types, so Rotom Heat will need to take on the birds with possible help from Stunfisk Galar. It's clear that Daz had a methodical plan when approaching this draft, but all too frequently great drafts on paper fail to perform. I don't think that will be the case this season. The defensive core mentioned before is a capable one, but the offensive core of Hydreigon, Hitmonlee, and Gardevoir is downright scary for most drafts. There are different pivoting options and boosters depending on the matchup, which can help snatch momentum and hold it. Plenty of options for both clearing and setting hazards will mean the Hydreigons will not only have full command over the hazard war, but also several ways to approach it. A general lack of speed control may force Araquanid to come with Sticky Web more often than not, but Chinchino is also available if need be. Limited priority options could catalyze speed shortcomings, though it should be noted that there are a lot of sucker punchers on this draft. Versatility is also pretty good, not just when it comes to coverage moves, but also strange utility moves that other coaches can't always predict. Gardevoir is the epitome of this. This is a textbook draft of typing balance, and it will be interesting to see how far Daz can take it. The Boston Bisharps, coached by Krakenation, rank 2nd. I keep preaching the importance of versatility in draft-based play, and it's hard to dispute Mew's crown in that regard. It's got perfectly even stats and access to more moves than Krakenation on the dance floor. Not content with that, he had to go and draft Type Null for even more move pool usage. Como-O and Boltund can theoretically be physical or special, though they are definitely both more physically inclined, and Boltund doesn't look to have much in the way of coverage. Play Rough and Psychic Fangs are interesting though. The draft ranks 1st in overall attack and 5th in special attack, so the Bisharps pack a serious punch. The lineup is without a fire, ice, or poison type, so it will be curious to see how Krakenation chooses to approach grass types. He's got Rabombi and Drifblim, but is likely going to have to rely on non-stab coverage to deal with grass tanks. No poison and fire type also means Berserker is the only fairy resist, which could prove to be a thorn in the side throughout the season. Obviously Mew gets everything, but Drifblim can also defog, and there are other stealth rockers and access to Sticky Web. There doesn't look to necessarily be an offensive or defensive core, strictly speaking, but just a bunch of versatility that can get the job done one way or another. There are boosters, pivoters, priority users, status options, pretty much everything you could ask for. Without much in the way of reliable recovery, Mew excluded of course, I'm not sure this draft will be able to take hits as well as they can dish them out. Even though it doesn't show in the typing synergy, which is quite good, the Bisharps may struggle to find continuous switch-ins unless defensive Mew comes week after week. Sure, he's got Synthesis on Rillaboom, but since when is Grass known for its defensive prowess? Case in point, the Bisharps are completely missing 3 Pokemon types that hit Grass and still have 2 Pokemon whose stab do super effective damage. This draft definitely has the capacity to put an opponent on their back foot and capitalize with the element of surprise thanks to its versatility, but I don't think it can withstand consistent pressure or long-lasting matches. The Chicago Flashfire, coached by Pisces, rank 1st. I'm a big fan of cores that involve typing trinities, and it looks like Pisces scored the classic Firewater Grass core with Turtonator, Jellicent, and Roselia. Throw a beefy steel type in the mix like Steelix for those pesky dragons, and your defensive core is looking very well prepared. With an abundance of status options, other annoying utility moves like Roar and Leech Seed, and pretty good recovery options, this trio may prove hard for coaches to prepare for. There are impressive offensive Pokemon as well, and the Flashfire are equipped with wall breakers like Darmanitan, Galar, and Espeon, boosters like Haxorus and Scrafty, and the disgusting vermin that is Togekiss. May God show you no mercy for drafting such a vile creature, Pisces. Seriously though, there is both speed control and mixed offensive capabilities throughout this draft, and they will be well supported by the aforementioned defensive Pokemon. They may struggle with ground types, as Togekiss serves as the only true ground switch-in, so defensive walls like Jellicent may be forced slightly out of their comfort zones to take hits that they don't necessarily resist. The draft as a whole looks pretty annoying to deal with, and can capitalize on opponents' frustrations and missteps with devastating boosters like Dragon Dance Haxorus or Scrafty, Calm Mind Espeon, and even Nasty Plot Togekiss. Darmanitan Galar can act like a booster too, if it has Zen mode. In fact, I'm very curious to see if Pisces can get that ability to work with any consistency. There aren't many negatives that catch my eye, except for hazard control, which leaves something to be desired. There are not many options for setting them up, and only Togekiss and Turtonator can remove them, both of which are weak to Stealth Rocks. It might look like there isn't much synergy between Pisces' offensive threats, Togekiss, Haxorus, Espeon, and non-Zen Darmanitan Galar, because they all have their stab resisted by steel types, but Scrafty, Steelix, and Turtonator should be able to pick up the slack. It just seems that the truly offensive Pokemon on this draft don't complement each other that well, but there are so few holes in the draft that there is always another option. Overall, the Flashfire looked downright scary, with too many offensive threats to possibly prepare for and too much defensive synergy to confidently challenge.